The porch light was off when I pulled in. This was the first thing. Not dramatic on its own, porch lights go off, bulbs burn out, people forget. But this porch light had been on every night for 3 years without exception, because I had been the one who turned it on, every evening at dusk. As part of the specific domestic rhythm of a household that I had managed with the same attention I brought to everything that mattered to me. The light being off meant someone had made a decision about the light. My name is Imani. I am 34 years old. It was a Thursday in November, 11:47 p.m., and I had been at the hospital for 6 hours with my mother, who had been admitted that afternoon with a cardiac event that had required my complete presence and my complete attention, and which I had given fully, calling home twice to check on my daughters, Zara, 7, and Chloe, 4, who were with their father David and his parents, Eugenia and Harold, who had come to stay for the week. I had called at 9. David had answered and said the girls were asleep and everything was fine. I pulled into the driveway at 11:47 and the porch light was off, and I reached for my key and I walked to the front door and I put my key in the lock, and the lock did not give in the way of a lock that has been bolted from the inside. I tried the side door. Bolted. The back door. Bolted. I stood in the backyard in November and I looked at my house, the house that David and I had purchased together 4 years ago. The house where my daughters were sleeping, the house where I had turned on the porch light every evening for 3 years. And I understood that every door had been secured against me while I was sitting at my mother's hospital bedside. My children were inside. I was outside. In November. At 11:47 p.m. I walked back to the driveway. I sat in my car. I made one phone call. Not to David. Not to Eugenia or Harold. Not to anyone in that house. I called the one person who would know exactly what this moment required. Before I tell you what happened by morning, I need to tell you who Eugenia was and how we had arrived at 11:47 p.m. on a Thursday in November with every door in my house bolted against me. Eugenia was 61 years old. She had the specific quality of a woman who had organized her family around her own authority for so long that she had stopped distinguishing between what was her business and what was not. She was not cruel. I want to be precise about this, because the story is not about cruelty. She was a woman who loved her son completely and who had loved him across 40 years of mothering in the specific way of someone for whom love and management are the same action. She had not liked me from the beginning. Not from dislike of who I was, from the specific resistance of a woman who has been the primary female authority in her son's life and who recognizes when that authority is being redistributed, that redistribution as a loss before she has had time to understand it as a gain. David and I had been married for 5 years. We had been in conflict, not the constant conflict of an unhappy marriage, but the specific difficult conflict of two people who are navigating something real and who have not yet found the language for it, for approximately 8 months. Eugenia had arrived 3 days ago with Harold, ostensibly for a week's visit. I had understood from her first evening, from the way she rearranged the kitchen when she thought I wasn't looking, from the way she spoke to David in the half-voiced register of a woman conducting a consultation, that the visit was not a visit. I had said nothing. My mother's cardiac event on Thursday afternoon had given Eugenia the opportunity she had been organizing the week around. I did not know this until I was standing at the back door at 11:51 p.m. finding it bolted. Then I understood. This had been planned. Not my mother's illness, the response to it. The specific decision about what to do with the hours when I was at the hospital and the children were asleep and the house was theirs. I walked to my car. I sat down. I called Renata. Renata James was 41 years old, African American, and had been practicing family law for 16 years with the specific sharp-edged warmth of a woman who had entered the field because she had watched her own mother navigate a custody situation without adequate representation and who had decided, at 22 years old, that she was going to be the representation that other women needed. She answered on the second ring. It was 3 minutes past midnight. Imani, she said. I'm in my driveway, I said. Every door in my house is bolted from the inside. My daughters are in there. My in-laws are in there. My husband may or may not be in there. I've been at the hospital with my mother since 4 this afternoon. The silence that followed was not the silence of someone receiving shocking information. It was the specific brief silence of a professional organizing a response. "How old are your daughters?" she said. 7 and 4, I said. "Are they in immediate danger?" she said. "No," I said. "They're asleep. They don't know I'm outside." "Does your name appear on the deed or lease for the property?" she said. "Both names on the deed," I said. "David and mine. I have the closing documents." "Good," she said. "Don't knock on the door. Don't call David. Don't engage with anyone in the house tonight. I need you to stay in your car and stay on the line with me." "All right," I said. "I'm making 2 calls," she said. "The first is to a colleague who handles emergency family court motions. The second is to the non-emergency police line for your district. What I'm going to request is a welfare check combined with a property owner's access restoration. You are a co-owner of that property, Imani. Being locked out of your own home at midnight while your children are inside is not a gray area." I looked at my house through the windshield. The upstairs window of Zara's room was dark. Chloe's night light was visible through the curtains. "They're okay," I said. Mostly to myself. "Yes," Renata said. "And by morning they will know their mother is exactly where she is supposed to be." I believed her. Renata had never given me a reason not to. The waiting was the hardest chapter. I want to tell you this plainly because the waiting deserves its honesty and because the impulse in moments like this one, a mother outside her own house with her children inside, is to do something immediate and visible and loud. And the specific discipline of doing nothing visible while Renata worked was the hardest thing I have ever practiced. I sat in my car. The November night had the particular quality of late autumn cold, the kind that doesn't announce itself dramatically, but that finds the gaps in whatever you're wearing and settles there with the patient permanence of something that intends to stay. I had been in the hospital since 4, and I had eaten nothing since 2, and my coat was in the house, because I had left that morning in a rush when my mother's call came, and I was sitting in November in a cardigan, and the cold was the specific kind of cold that makes everything else harder. I thought about Zara. She slept on her left side with her arm around a stuffed elephant named Gerald that she had owned since she was 2 and that had been repaired twice, once by me, once by my own mother, who had sewn the ear back on with the specific patient stitching of a grandmother who understands that the object is not the point and the care is. Zara was 7 and was already the kind of child who noticed things before adults did and who asked questions that required honest answers. I thought about Chloe. For years old. The specific compact energy of a child who has not yet learned to manage her enthusiasm for anything, including the Tuesday she had discovered that the dog next door would come to the fence if you held a leaf. She had cried when I left that afternoon not because she was afraid, but because she was 4 and goodbyes were still practice skills. They were asleep. They did not know I was 30 feet away in a car in November. Renata called back at 12:22. "A unit is en route," she said. "Estimated 15 minutes. I have also filed an emergency motion with the duty family court judge. We have a hearing at 8 a.m. "Tonight?" I said. "The filing is tonight," she said. "The hearing is 8 a.m. Are you available?" "I will be available," I said. I did not sleep. They arrived at 12:41. 2 officers. A man and a woman. The woman, she appeared to be in her mid-30s, with the specific composed efficiency of someone who has handled enough situations to have stopped being surprised by the variety of shapes they take, came to my car window first. I showed her my identification. I showed her the photo of the deed on my phone that I had access through the digital records service I had set up 3 years ago when we closed on the house. Because I am the kind of person who digitizes important documents and stores them in accessible places, because I had grown up watching my mother search for things when things needed to be found and had decided, at some point before adulthood, to be the other kind of person. The officer reviewed the documentation. She spoke to her partner. They went to the front door. I watched from the car. The male officer knocked. The porch was dark. He knocked again. A light came on inside. David opened the door. I could not hear the conversation from the car, but I could read it from the body language, David's initial resistance, the specific confusion of a man who had expected the morning and not the midnight, and then the gradual reorganization of someone understanding that the situation had moved outside the frame he had placed it in. Eugenia appeared behind him. She looked past the officers toward my car. I looked back. I did not wave. I did not get out. I sat in the car with my hands in my lap, and I looked at the woman who had bolted every door in my house at midnight while I was at the hospital with my mother, and I held her gaze with the specific quality of a woman who has been waiting in the cold for 47 minutes and who is not going to be the one who looks away. She looked away. The female officer came back to my car. "You can go in," she said. "Thank you," I said. I got out of the car. I went inside. I went upstairs. I checked Zara first. Sleeping. Gerald under her arm. I checked Chloe. Sleeping. Night light on. I sat on the floor of the hallway between their rooms. I sat there for a while. David found me on the hallway floor. I had been sitting for approximately 20 minutes, not from breakdown, not from the specific theatrical collapse of someone who has been through something and is now performing having been through it, but from the specific practical decision of a woman who needed to be between her daughter's rooms and who needed to be still before she could be anything else. He sat on the floor beside me. Not facing me, beside me, with his back against the wall and his knees up, in the specific posture of a man who has arrived at a situation he does not know how to stand inside and who has chosen, in the absence of a clear standing position, to simply be present in the same plane as his wife. "Imani," he said. "David," I said. "I didn't know she was going to do that," he said. I sat with this. "What did you think she was going to do?" I said. He was quiet. "She said she wanted to talk to me tonight," he said. She said she needed time to talk to me without the situation being complicated by me," I said. "Yes," he said. "And bolting every door was her idea," I said. "I didn't know she was going to do that," he said again. "David," I said. "Whether you knew she was going to bolt the doors specifically, I believe you may not have known that specific thing. What I need you to understand is that the conditions that made bolting the doors possible were conditions you allowed. You allowed her to come for this week with this purpose. You allowed whatever conversation she was trying to have to be planned in advance. The doors are the visible version of something that was already built." He was quiet for a long time. "The hearing is at 8 a.m., he said. "Yes," I said. "Imani." "David," I said. "I need to sleep for a few hours. Can we have the conversation that needs to happen after 8? He looked at the wall. "Yes," he said. "Thank you," I said. I went to the bedroom. I lay down. I did not sleep, but I was horizontal, and horizontal was the closest I could get to rest. The hearing was at 8 a.m. in a courtroom that had the specific functional austerity of rooms designed for work rather than comfort, clean lines, flat light. The particular atmosphere of a space that has processed enough difficult human situations to have become professionally neutral about all of them. Renata was already there when I arrived. She had slept 4 hours. She looked like someone who had slept 4 hours and had used the other 4 doing the work that makes 4 hours of sleep possible. She was wearing a dark structured suit and had her files organized with the specific completeness of someone who had done this 16 times before for 16 different women and who understood that the difference between prepared and unprepared in a courtroom is the difference between 2 completely different mornings. "How are you?" she said. "Present," I said. "Good," she said. "That's what this morning needs." The hearing was before a family court judge who had the particular settled efficiency of someone who has been hearing cases for long enough to read a situation from its documents before the parties have finished arranging themselves. She read Renata's filing. She read the officer's report from the welfare check. She looked at the documentation of co-ownership. She looked at Eugenia and Harold, who had come with a family attorney who had clearly been assembled in haste. She looked at me. "Mrs. Imani," she said. "You were at a hospital with your mother last evening?" "Yes, Your Honor," I said. "She was admitted with a cardiac event at approximately 4 p.m. And you returned home at approximately 11:47 p.m. to find every door of your jointly owned property secured against you?" "Yes, Your Honor." She set down the file. She looked at the opposing attorney. "I am going to be direct," she said, "because this situation does not require indirection. The property in question is jointly owned. The children in the property are the joint children of Mrs. Imani and her husband. The actions taken at midnight have no legal basis I can identify and several legal implications I am going to describe now." She described them. For 11 minutes. When she finished, Eugenia's attorney was writing very quickly. Renata was perfectly still. She had heard every word before. She had known they were coming. The judge's 11 minutes produced 3 immediate outcomes. The first was a formal order confirming my right of access to the jointly owned property, an order that made explicit, in legal language that could not be misread or reframed, that no person residing temporarily in that property had the authority to restrict the access of a co-owner. The second was a requirement that Eugenia and Harold vacate the property within 24 hours. Not punitive, the judge was precise about this, but necessary given the circumstances of the previous evening and the documented pattern of interference in the marital household. The third outcome was a recommendation, not an order, a recommendation, which carried the specific weight of a family court judge's recommendation that David and I enter mediated family counseling within 30 days. I sat with all three. Not with triumph. I want to be precise about this, because the morning was not a victory in the way of a competition decided by a score. It was a clarification. The morning clarified what had always been true and produced a legal document confirming the clarification, which is what courts do when people have made decisions that require the truth to be confirmed in writing. Renata drove me home. In the car she said, "You did everything correctly." I sat in my car for 47 minutes, I said. That was the correctly done thing, she said. Staying in the car was the correctly done thing. Not engaging was the correctly done thing. Calling me was the correctly done thing. She looked at the road. Imani, you're a mother who came home from her own mother's hospital bedside at midnight and found every door of her own house locked against her. And you sat in your car and called an attorney and did not knock on the door or engage with anyone or do anything that could have been used against you in the hearing we just left. I looked out the window. I was sitting on Zara's hallway floor thinking about the stuffed elephant, I said. Gerald, she said. I looked at her. You told me about Gerald once, she said. About your mother sewing the ear back on. I had forgotten I had told her that. Yes, I said. That's why you sat on the floor, she said. Not because you were broken. Because you were where your daughters were. My mother was discharged from the hospital on Saturday. She had not known about Thursday night until Saturday morning when I told her, sitting in her hospital room with the specific quality of morning light that comes through hospital windows, filtered, institutional, oddly gentle. And she listened with the complete attention of a woman who has been in a hospital bed for 2 days and whose ability to do anything except listen has been temporarily and completely removed. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. She looked at her hands. The ear, she said. What? I said. Zara's elephant, she said. I sewed the ear back on in March. I know, I said. I want you to tell me, she said, that the children are all right. They're all right, I said. They slept through everything. Zara asked me Thursday morning why I looked tired. I told her I had been up late. She said she had been up late too because Gerald had been uncomfortable and she'd had to rearrange him. My mother smiled. Good, she said. How are you? I said. Better than I was, she said. The doctor says the event was significant, but the damage is manageable with medication and specific changes. She looked at me. Imani, tell me honestly. Are you all right? I thought about the driveway. The cold. The 47 minutes in the car. The hallway floor between the 2 bedrooms. The hearing at 8 a.m. Renata beside me. The judge's 11 minutes. Gerald's ear. I'm getting there, I said. What does that mean specifically, she said. It means, I said, that I am in the specific process of deciding what comes next with complete clarity rather than from the middle of last Thursday night. She nodded. David, she said. We're talking, I said. Honestly. More honestly than we have been. Whether the marriage survives the honesty is something I don't know yet. And the girls, she said. Are exactly who they are, I said. Zara is asking questions I have to think before I answer. Chloe found a caterpillar yesterday and has named it. My mother laughed. The hospital room held it, the specific warm laugh of a woman who has been in a bed for 2 days and whose daughter has just reminded her that life continues in its ordinary, extraordinary way, regardless of what Thursday night contained. Here is what I kept from a driveway in November and 47 minutes of cold and 1 phone call, and a hearing at 8 a.m. and a hallway floor between 2 bedrooms. I kept the discipline of the driveway. Not the cold, the decision to stay in the car. The specific hard practice discipline of a woman who understood that the correct thing and the instinctive thing were different things, and who chose the correct thing even though the instinctive thing, to knock, to call, to demand, to make herself heard by volume and force, was everything her body wanted. I have returned to this discipline in the months since. In every difficult moment where instinct says loud and judgment says still, I remember the driveway. I choose still. I call the right person. I wait. I kept Renata. She answered at midnight. She filed before 1 a.m. She drove me home and remembered Gerald's name. She is my attorney for as long as either of us needs this to be true, which I expect is a long time, because the things that Renata represents, preparation, precision, the specific fierce competence of a woman who became what other women needed, are the things I intend to keep close. I kept the hallway floor. The 20 minutes between Zara's room and Chloe's room, sitting on the floor with my back against the wall, confirming with my own presence that I was between them and they were safe. This was not dramatic. It was the most motherly thing I have ever done, not the legal filing, not the correct discipline of the driveway, but the sitting on the floor in the hallway being exactly where my daughters were even though they didn't know I was there. I kept my mother's laugh in the hospital room when I told her about the caterpillar. David and I are in counseling. Honest counseling, the kind where the things that need to be said are said even when saying them is the hardest available action. I do not know what the marriage becomes. I know what it was, and I know what it needs to be, and I am doing the specific patient work of someone who makes decisions from clarity rather than from the middle of a hard night. I am 34 years old. Every door in my house was bolted against me at midnight. My children were inside. I sat in my car. I made one phone call. By morning, everything had been unraveled. Not by force. By the specific power of a woman who knew exactly who to call. If this story reached something in you, if you have ever had to stay still when everything in you wanted to move, and discovered that staying still was its own kind of power, I want to hear about it in the comments. What was your one phone call? Stories like this one stay alive because people carry them forward. Share this with someone who needs it today. And if you would like more stories told honestly, the way things worth keeping deserve to be told, subscribe. We will be here. The end.